everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. First, we go to North Carolina, where 4 sheriff's deputies involved in Andrew Brown Jr.'s death are back at work. So what's going on with the case? Then over in California, we are visiting the happiest place on earth, Disneyland, reopening its doors to California residents today.
It was just amazing because I haven't been there in so long. It just felt like magic.
And facts over fear, we've got plenty of data on COVID and the vaccine. So why do our brains tend to worry instead of weighing the risks and rewards? We ask the experts. All right, let's get right to NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber. She's in Elizabeth City, North Carolina for us. Ellison, 4 of the sheriff's deputies, involved in the Brown shooting are back on active duty. What is the department saying about that today?
Yeah, so the sheriff released the name of 10 deputies who were on scene when Andrew Brown was shot and killed. 3 of those deputies have either resigned or retired since the shooting. The other 7 were on administrative leave, but now 4 of those officers are back on active duty. And the sheriff says that is because those 4 never fired their weapons. In a statement, the sheriff here, Tommy Wooten, said this, quote, after reviewing the preliminary conclusions of the independent investigators conducting the internal review and after carefully examining the body camera footage of the incident with my own staff, it is obvious that 4 of the deputies never fired their weapons and deserve to be reinstated to active duty. More investigation is necessary into the 3 deputies who did fire their weapons, and they will remain on administrative leave pending completion of the internal investigation and or the criminal investigation being conducted by the State Bureau of Investigation. So the 3 deputies who fired shots, according to the sheriff, and remain on administrative leave are these 3. Investigator Daniel Meads, Deputy Sheriff Robert Morgan, and Corporal Aaron Llewellyn. Meads has been with the sheriff's office for about 5.5 years, Morgan for about 5 years, and Llewellyn has been with the sheriff's office here for just about 2 years. So 4 officers who were on administrative leave are now being moved back into active duty. 3 remain on administrative leave. And again, that is because the sheriff here says that the 4 going back in active duty did not fire their weapons. But of course, we have not been able to see body camera footage of this. The family has only seen about 20 seconds of it so far, but that is the sheriff's account at this point. Allison?
Ellison, I'm hearing that there's some new information on a curfew there. What's going on?
Yeah, so the curfew for the last week about has been 8 p.m. and now starting tonight, it is going to be relaxed a bit and moved to midnight. We were inside, actually, as some of the main protest organizers with the local chapter of the NAACP came to get a permit to protest for the next, I think this one went actually for about the next 2 weeks from 2 p.m. to midnight every day, if they so please. The city manager says that they are struggling with trying to balance allowing people to protest, to do it safely, and also having enough resources. They only have within the city, Elizabeth City Police, they have about 77 officers. So they've had help come from outside, but they say there are still normal 911 calls. So they say they've been trying to juggle a lot. He thinks that they are trying and moving in the right direction in terms of how they're handling the curfew, but that has been a point of contention among protesters here and not necessarily supported all the time. At the same time, you have people who live here who had some concerns about roadways being blocked. Allison?
Ellison, you've got some new details as well on Andrew Brown Jr.'s funeral. What do you know about that?
Right. So now we know that viewings will take place on Sunday. There will be one in the morning that is private and just for family and friends. And then in the afternoon, there will be a viewing in this area that is open to the public. Monday afternoon, that's when there will be a funeral, a celebration of life for Andrew Brown. And that is invitation only. Allison.
All right. Ellison Barber in Elizabeth City. Thank you so much. A black librarian pulled from her car by her hair during a traffic stop. Now she's suing a North Carolina police department. Just a warning, this video may be disturbing to our viewers. This body cam video shows officers dragging Stephanie Bottom to the ground back in May, of 2019. Police say they pulled her over for speeding and for failing to obey officers' sirens. NBC News correspondent Ron Allen joins me now. Ron, Bottom was 66 years old in that video, and man, that is difficult to watch. What can you tell us about what happened here? What do we know so far?
Well, she claims she was severely injured in that she was on the ground for a long time and not getting any medical attention. All this started, she was driving to a family funeral and going about 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, and the police tried to stop her. And on the tape, you can hear the police say that they chased her or followed her for about 10 miles, and she didn't pull over. She says she didn't realize that they were trying to pull her over. And so she kept going. And when they got there and she stopped, you see what happens on the video. They have guns drawn. They drag her out of the car, put her on the ground, and arrest her and put her in handcuffs. And all the while, you may not hear, she is screaming that she has an injured shoulder, had some rotator cuff problem. And essentially, at the end of this, she required surgery, and she missed 8 weeks of work because of this. And again, this is out of a traffic stop, and she's a 68-year-old librarian now who was driving to a funeral. It's just really striking, is all you can say. It's amazing.
Yeah, look, Ron, I know I don't know the full picture here, and I'm just watching this video, but it is just hard to watch that woman who you say is a librarian on her way to a funeral. I mean, she just does not look like someone who needs to be handled in that kind of way. I mean, it's so upsetting to watch that video over and over again. What do we know about the officers involved here? What's happened to them? What are the police saying about this lawsuit? Are they defending what happened here?
Well, we're not hearing a lot from the police department. It's important to point out as well that the woman, Ms. Bottom, has filed a federal civil rights lawsuit alleging excessive force. And it is her attorneys who released this and made this video public, not the police department in Salisbury, North Carolina, which is where the incident happened. They did release a statement that says in part that the police department strives for positive interactions with our residents and visitors, including in cases where we may suspect criminal activity. As is standard, we are unable to comment on pending litigation. So not a lot. In the lawsuit, Ms. Bottom's attorneys allege that the officers who were involved, at least 3 of them, were never disciplined for any of this, based on what they were able to determine from their personnel records and so forth, that they were never disciplined and that they are back on the job as best we can determine, as best they can determine.
Wow. Ron, it is an upsetting story. It is disturbing video to watch, but it is really important that we see it. Thanks so much for bringing us this story today. President Biden pushing his jobs and infrastructure plan with a stop in Philadelphia for Amtrak's 50th anniversary.
I've been riding an Amtrak for almost as long as there's been an Amtrak. I've come to see that Amtrak doesn't just carry us from one place to another. It opens up enormous possibilities. And especially now, it makes it possible to build an economy of the future and one that we need.
NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memley in Philadelphia with the president. Mike, job creation, a big focus today. What else did President Biden get into besides his love of trains?
Yeah, that's right, Allison. Amtrak is, of course, Biden is the #1 customer. He took more than 8,000 trips by his own count when he was a senator, and even as vice president. He came for their 50th birthday celebration today, has brought them a pretty big gift, $80 billion as part of his American jobs plan intended to go towards passenger rail. And it's interesting because whenever the president talks about climate change, he talks about it in the context of jobs. But today, when he was talking about Amtrak and the potential to create jobs, he also talked about it in the context of climate change. Take a listen.
Last week, I announced a target of cutting greenhouse gases and gas emissions in half by 2030. And most of those emissions in this country come from transportation. But if just 10% of the freight ship and the largest trucks went by rail instead, we'd be removing 3,300,000 cars from the road, and we've been planting, is the same as doing that, or planting 260 million trees in America. And as I've said from the beginning, when I think about fighting climate change, I think about jobs.
So, Allison, you know, it's interesting. I've followed Joe Biden, as you know, a long time. He says, I don't wear funny hats, but he had a pretty cool hat on there, the Amtrak logo and the presidential seal. Well, our great producer, Winston Wild, got some party favors from the birthday party inside. Here's the 50th anniversary hat, and I got an extra one. I'll put it on the 520 Acela. You can pick it up in Penn Station in about an hour and a half.
Mike, I was about to say I'm so jealous, but you are such a good guy. You got me a funny hat. I owe you one. You're the best. I could talk about this all day, but we do have some other issues to get to. The Biden administration announcing today it's stopping all flights from India because of the COVID surge in that country. Really scary. When does that go into effect? And what is the U.S. doing to help India? We know they are really in desperate need.
Yeah, that's right. It'll go into effect next week. Now, importantly, I should say, it doesn't apply to U.S. citizens. So any American citizens who are there will be able to come back to the U.S. But we heard President Biden earlier this week talk about why it was so important that the United States, offer its assistance to India in its time of need. Of course, India, one of the world's largest democracies. He pointed out that India was such a great help, as you can hear the Amtrak behind us here, to the United States during the peak of COVID here a year ago, sending over PPE, ventilators, oxygen. Well, that's exactly what the U.S. is now doing in reverse, sending that to India. Now, interestingly, Vice President Harris, whose mother, of course, came to the U.S. from India, she talked about what a horrible tragedy this is. She said the U.S. has put a dollar amount on that kind of assistance that it will be sending there, doing everything they can to help our key ally in the region.
All right. Wonderful to hear that they are trying to help for sure. I know how bad things are over there. We've been reporting on it daily. Mike, to end this on a happy note, thanks. If you could just stuff a cheesesteak from Oscars in the hat. I'm an Oscars girl. If you could throw one of those in there and just get it on the train, I'm sure no one will mind. And I'll pick it up at Penn. Thank you.
Whiz, no onions, right? Okay.
Whiz with. Yep. Whiz with. No. I take it all. Whiz with. I'll take the onions. He signed a bill banning transgender athletes from competing in female sports. But today on MSNBC Reports with Stephanie RUHLE, West Virginia Governor Jim Justice could not give a single example of a transgender athlete having an unfair advantage in his state. Take a look.
Sir, you have no examples of this happening. Why would you take your time to do this? Let's talk about other things that I can give you examples of in your state. According to U.S. News and World Report, West Virginia ranks 45th in education, 47th in healthcare, 48th on the economy, and 50th in infrastructure. If you cannot name one single example for me of a child doing this, why would you make this a priority? I just named 4 things that would seem to me like a much bigger priority.
Well, Stephanie, I didn't make it a priority. It wasn't my bill.
You signed it.
I mean, it's just come to me, and I have absolutely signed it because I believe, from the standpoint of a coach, I believe that girls work so hard to obtain Title IX, and I do not have any idea now why we are trying to disadvantage them in participating in the sport that they put so much into.
Earlier this week at his joint address to Congress, President Biden told transgender Americans he has their back. But has he done enough for them in his first 100 days? Here's NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson.
A personal pledge from a powerful platform.
For all transgender Americans watching at home, especially young people, you're so brave. I want you to know your president has your back.
Jessica Fuller is one of those Americans. She came out as transgender when she was 16. Her dad never expected to share her story publicly.
I didn't know if I was going to fall apart and cry or laugh,
much less go viral opposing an Alabama bill making it a felony for minors to receive the same kind of gender-affirming care Jessica did.
So you're asking me to someday put handcuffs on these people that are heroes in my life and arrest the people that saved my daughter? Please don't ask me to do that.
I was proud. It's not just Alabama. It's estimated more than half of all states are considering bills that would restrict trans rights, a record 80 plus in all, most involving either medical care or sports, the latest front in a political culture war.
If this does not change, women's sports as we know it will die.
We are talking about erasing the definition of woman. When we replace sex with gender identity, there's no boundaries with that.
New polling shows most Americans oppose laws limiting trans rights, and President Biden campaigned on a promise to protect them. In his first 100 days, he's reversed the Trump-era ban on transgender troops, threatened sanctions on countries that restrict trans rights, and nominated the first openly transgender person to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate.
I voted for him because of these issues. You know, more than anything else.
What is your message to legislators in other states?
Listen to these kids because they're telling the truth. And there's nothing else to tell.
For them, it's not politics, but personal. Hallie Jackson, NBC News, Washington.
We are back in Beaver County, Pennsylvania tonight. It's a county that went to Donald Trump by about 18 points in the last election. So how do folks there feel about President Biden's first 100 days? NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns checks in with voters.
Hey, Allison, this area represents a challenge for Democrats. This used to be a Democratic stronghold. It was home to the steel industry. But as the steel mills moved out, conservative politics moved in, and Trump carried this area by double digits in both 2016 and 2020. And so we came back here to reconnect with voters we've been talking to for the past year for our County to County series. And I asked voters here to give President Biden a report card for his first 100 days, and he was averaging a grade of about a C- or D+ with voters here. Not surprising that people are not thrilled with a president that they did not elect. But as I've been talking to people here for quite some time now, the number one priority that has come up time and time again is the economy. They say it's why they voted for a businessman for president, and they also say it's the reason they're concerned about this administration and its proposals. The other big piece here, and you can see it behind me right now, the Shell ethane cracker plant. It is hard to find a person in this community that does not have some relationship to the oil and gas industry. So the other big topic with voters here, their concerns about this administration's posture on energy. A lot of opinions, and I want you to hear just some of our conversations.
So my biggest concern with President Biden and the economy is that at some point we have to address the spending and what it's going to take to pay for that, and when this pendulum comes swinging back. The influx of money into the economy to help individual businesses and individual workers mitigate the pandemic, but there needs to be a shift back, and then there needs to be sustainability moving forward.
My dad used to say all the time, talk's cheap. Okay, so he's talking a great talk about the free education, free this, free that, and taxing the 1% wealthy, but it's one thing is saying it, it's another thing of doing it, collecting all that money for his programs and not hurting the economy and not hurting people's jobs. That's my biggest concern.
The grade for bipartisanship?
Oh, it's an F. It's an F on both sides.
Oh, an F on both sides.
Without a doubt.
Myself, I would say a D. Because again, I remember him saying that during the campaign. He wanted to do this, he wanted to do that. But a lot of the Republicans are saying that he hasn't reached out at all. You know, and they're doing what they want to do. They have control of the Senate and the presidency now, so they can do whatever they want, and that's what they're doing. They're not going to compromise that's satisfying any of the Republicans. They're going to do what they want.
Allison, another interesting point here. The last time I was in Beaver County, just a couple of months ago, most of the voters I spoke with still very much saw Donald Trump as the future of the GOP. But when I had that conversation again with voters this week, the majority of people I talked to here did say that they were and are still fans of Donald Trump, but the majority also said that they wouldn't be disappointed if he did not run again in 2024, many saying it's time for some new blood in the GOP.
Texas gearing up for a massive legal and political fight over redistricting. The population there up 16% in the last 10 years, according to the new 2020 census data. That gives Texas 2 more congressional seats. MSNBC senior national correspondent Chris Jansing checks out the battle that's brewing in Austin.
Hey, Allison. Well, you know they like to go big in Texas, and a big fight is brewing over redistricting. Before people turn away and say, what's that all about? Let me tell you why it's so important and why it has national implications wherever you live. State legislatures control how maps get redrawn, how congressional districts get laid out once every 10 years, and that's where we are now. Here in Texas, that means Republicans who are in charge of the legislature get to figure out how to make that map that now will have 38 separate districts, 38 seats in Congress. And Republicans only need to gain 5 seats to take control of the House of Representatives. Both sides talk to me about why national attention is being paid.
Well, I think it's going to be a big fight. Texas, unfortunately, shamefully, has a history of passing racially discriminatory maps, gerrymandered maps on a racial basis that have disenfranchised African-American, Hispanic, and Asian-American communities in Texas. And that's not me saying that. That's federal courts that have said that repeatedly over the last decade.
What the Democrats are doing is, once again, is the racial divisiveness and the identity politics. When they're just losing elections, they're losing population from blue states, and they're coming here to Texas because people want better opportunities.
So yes, huge implications for Congress, but also huge stakes for voters. The reason Texas got 2 new congressional seats, and I hope you can hear me over this torrential downpour, is because about 4 million new people moved in. 2 million of them Hispanic, about 600,000 plus Black. The very same people that a court 10 years ago, when Republicans redistricted, the court said they were disenfranchised, that the lines were drawn to make it harder for them to vote. That's why Democrats say they know they can't win in the legislature, but they are ready to fight it out in the courts.
2019, that's when Rudy Giuliani knew he was being targeted by a Russian influence campaign. NBC News confirming the FBI briefed Giuliani that year. NBC News correspondent Ken Delaney has more on that meeting and how it could impact the current FBI investigation into Giuliani.
Hey, Allison. NBC News has confirmed a Washington Post report that Rudy Giuliani was given a so-called defensive briefing way back in 2019 by the FBI. This was separate from the federal criminal investigation. This is members of the FBI's counterintelligence division, the spy hunters, going to Rudy and telling him that they are seeing a Russian influence operation by Russian intelligence to try to discredit Joe Biden to help Donald Trump win the election. And that Rudy was dealing with some of the people who were essentially working for Russian intelligence. They told him all of this. We don't know what Rudy said in return, and I should say that Rudy's lawyer says this never happened, but we are confident in our sourcing, as is the Washington Post. But we do know that shortly after this briefing, Rudy Giuliani traveled to the capital of Ukraine and met with a man named Andrei Derkach, a Russian parliamentarian who had known ties to the Russian intelligence, and in fact, who was named publicly by Donald Trump's Treasury Department a year later in 2020 as being essentially a Russian intelligence asset involved in trying to influence the election. So until that point, until Treasury sanctioned this guy, Rudy Giuliani was dealing with him and others and was right in the middle of what we now know is a Russian influence operation. Now, it's not illegal to be a pawn of an intelligence agency if you're not being paid, but it's incredibly it's actually stunning and amazing that the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, the former mayor of New York, would find himself in this position. Now, the federal investigation is going a step further and asking the question of whether he was lobbying as a foreign agent, trying to influence U.S. policy for money and without registering. And if that's the case, that's a crime. There are also issues of money laundering at play. If he was paid, how did he account for the money? There are tax issues. All of this stuff is why the federal government has been going through Rudy Giuliani's financial records. It's why they seized his electronic devices in these raids, which brings us here today. So Rudy Giuliani is in a lot of hot water because what this briefing shows is that he was given ample warning that he was on perilous ground. And if there ever is an indictment and a trial, you can be sure that these FBI agents will be called to testify about what they told Rudy Giuliani about his dealings with Russian intelligence.
After more than a year, the happiest place on earth back open today, Disneyland in California. Take a look at the first people to pass through the gates today. Yeah, they look pretty excited. Tickets to that theme park sold out for weeks. NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce is the lucky one. She is at the park in Anaheim, California. Simone, what's it like there today? I imagine it has been an awesome day so far.
Oh, it's been so much fun, Allison. Look, as you can see behind me, clearly there are a lot of people who are crowded outside of Disneyland today. A lot of people excited to be welcomed back into these gates. Now, for now, that's only going to mean California residents because the park is operating at a limited capacity of about 25%. And there are some COVID regulations in place, but really the Disney that so many people know and love is still there. I got a chance to go inside the park. Here's what it was like. After waiting in line for about 25 minutes, getting a COVID temperature check done, I am in the park. There he is, folks, the man of the hour. You do have to keep your distance if you want to see Mickey, though. With the park operating at 25% capacity, it does feel a little more empty than normal, but I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of nice. Something else that's noticeably different, when you wait for a ride, you're going to be waiting in line outside. So no more waiting inside structures to get on an attraction. One thing COVID can't take away from the Disneyland experience, these world famous churros. So good. Allison, all the COVID restrictions that you might expect, mandatory masking for anyone over the age of 2, limited capacity on all the rides, the famous rides that everybody knows and loves from this park, like Space Mountain. There's also no cash transactions. So for a lot of places, if you want to buy food or drink, you got to do it with a Disneyland app. But look, like I said, that's not stopping me from eating my way through the park.
Oh, my God. Simone, the churro look great. I could do with a little Space Mountain and some teacups. It has been a while. Great to see you back in the park. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Allison.
If you're fully vaccinated, but you're still worried about COVID, you are not alone. The CDC saying it's okay for fully vaccinated Americans to do things like get together with a small group of friends who are also vaccinated inside and lose the masks. But some people just aren't there yet. NBC News technology correspondent Jake Ward spoke to an expert to understand why.
In the United States, the end of the pandemic is in sight, and that's because of vaccines. 43% of Americans have had at least one dose. You know, and while we're used to thinking about the risk of COVID all the time, with a vaccine, that risk absolutely craters. You've seen headlines about breakthrough infections, and that concept sounds very scary. But those infections are, first of all, incredibly rare.
Only about 9,000 people have reported infections out of at least 95 million fully vaccinated Americans.
And those who did get sick almost always recovered.
Only 835 of those people even had to be hospitalized, and just 132 people died. That's terrible, of course, but that is a tiny number. It means that right now, less than 2 in a million vaccinated Americans have died from COVID.
Now, the risk may increase slightly over time, but the data is incredibly encouraging, even this early in the vaccination effort. Considering the death rate pre-vaccines, you are exponentially safer than you were before. And yet, we can't help but keep worrying, right? Our brains just grab on to scary headlines and rare side effects and other anxieties.
We have ancient instincts that make some risks feel scarier than others, which worked well when they were snakes and bears in the dark and not so well now. But we use all those tools to stay alive.
Throughout our history, we've invented new tools. Every day, you unconsciously reduce your risks by following simple rules and using new technology. The invention of speed limits and traffic lights at an intersection like this can save countless lives. Just by my putting on this seatbelt, I've reduced my chance of a fatal injury by nearly 50%. You add an airbag to that, and that chance goes down by 67%. Think of vaccines the same way. They won't eliminate your chances of catching COVID or even dying from it entirely. Just like wearing a seatbelt does not eliminate my chances of getting hurt in a car. But they're incredibly effective. All these precautions that we take to get through the modern world, wearing our masks, stopping at stop signs, getting vaccinated, not only reduces our own risk, it reduces everybody's. Now, we just have to get better at going with the data rather than with our gut.
And the best way to step back to make a healthier choice for yourself is to stop. When you read a headline, don't leap to a conclusion. Your brain wants to, doesn't have to work as hard that way. I've got it figured out. So-and-so says, I'm done. Stop. Don't let your instincts be your principal guide.
Scientists are now warning us that this pandemic may not be our last. We are likely to see another disease leap over from another species. But we can take some comfort in knowing that if we internalize the data, if we make use of the science, if we adopt the right tools, we can adapt and get through this.
The vaccine didn't make them sick, but the anxiety did. People in 5 states reporting symptoms like nausea, fainting, and chest pain after getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine this month. The CDC saying they were really nervous. Dr. George James is back with us again, and we are so glad that he's here. Dr. James is a licensed marriage and family therapist at the Council for Relationships, and he is here to help calm us down. Dr. James, my husband is getting his second shot as we speak. As a matter of fact, he just texted me he's done. He spent the last day drinking Pedialyte. He even cooked himself a healthy breakfast this morning. And I can assure you, this does not normally happen on weekdays in our house. The bottom line, he's been worried about the possible side effects of the second shot, and he just wanted to do everything he could not to get them. Some people are far more afraid than that. So how can we calm our nerves, do our duty, and go out and get those vaccines?
Yeah, you know, if only what your husband did was what we all do every day. I mean, we'd probably be champions running like, you know, a marathon. You know, I think like some of this is that, you know, the anxiety is normal. And I think like it's just that we have to admit that. We have to admit that there's certain things that make us nervous, overwhelmed, even scared. And the thought of dying or the thought of getting sick is scary. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But if we can trust the facts, as we were just listening to the segment before, if we can listen to the data, if we can look at even our friends and family around us, we can realize that it's okay and that you will be okay and that the vaccine actually will help you, for the most part, to be able to survive any of the risk that's out there more than not getting the vaccine.
Our technology correspondent, Jake Ward, just did a story on how worried we can still be, even when the science and the data in front of us tell us that these vaccines are safe, that we are safer once we have them. Why is it human nature that we put fear over the facts sometimes? Why do we do that? And how can we be more aware of that fear and deal with it better so it simply doesn't overwhelm us? Because I know there are times when it builds up so much, you really feel like the walls are caving in around you.
Yeah, you know, I was actually thinking about 2 segments before where they talked about Disney World. And, like you think about roller coasters, and like we're often afraid to get on a roller coaster, but then we will somehow tell ourselves it's going to be a great experience. And I think that it is the thoughts that we tell ourselves. It is the stories that we tell ourselves. It is the narrative that we create that really makes the difference. And so sometimes the fear and anxiety will create a bigger story. We'll say that it's going to be the worst thing or that you will be the one, versus trusting the information that's in front of us. And so sometimes we have to repeat that story, repeat what the CDC says, repeat what we've seen to others, repeat what your husband just did, like to know that there are people out there and we can trust it. And that's what you tell yourself. Trust it, trust it, trust it. You will be okay.
Dr. James, he's going to be so excited when I tell him that we all approve of what he did today. You know, wives don't always say that all too often. So he's going to feel real good when he walks in the door. I love that expression that you use, though. A marriage and family therapist whom I know and love to just watch the things that she posts and the advice that she gives always talks about that. What are the stories that we tell ourselves? And how real are they, right? Are we fooling ourselves into being afraid? Are we scaring ourselves? Or are we really, telling the truths in our minds? And I think it's such a great way to look at it. I have to ask you about kids. Because we know that they're having a tough time in this as well. 1 in 4 kids has become angry, anxious, or stressed during the pandemic. That's according to a new study of parents and caregivers. It was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. That same study found that 1 in 3 kids are feeling lonely because they don't see their friends in school. How can we help kids through that now? But also, how can we help them figure out getting back to school and getting back to socializing again? Because like all of us, right? They might be out of practice, and that might be really tough and scary for them, too.
Yeah, for many kids, they are struggling. And the difference, I think, with adults is that maybe we've had an experience or two where life has been challenging or difficult, and we maybe be able to rely on that. For some kids, this is the first major thing that they've experienced. So as adults, as parents, as those who love them, we have to reassure them, right? We have to reassure because for a lot of children, they're realizing that unpredictable things can happen, bad things can happen. And that's just scary overall. So we need to reassure them. We need to have fun with them. We need to engage with them and use this summer to allow them to know that even though things have been unpredictable, things can go back to a better place. And here are the safety precautions. Here are the things that we're doing. Here's what mom or dad or family members are doing to help them know that, look, we can provide some safety and security, and that will allow some of the anxiety to go down. Reassure them, love them, have fun with them, be in tune with them, and I think that can help.
Yeah. Dr. James, having you on is like taking a deep breath. Thank you for helping us go into the weekend a bit more calm.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
With the first pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, Clemson.
Shock and awe in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence going first overall in the draft. I'm just kidding, right? Everybody knew that one was coming. But we weren't exactly expecting Aaron Rodgers to overshadow the big night. Joining me now to play Friday evening quarterback, Yahoo Sports senior NFL reporter Charles Robinson. All right, Charles, 5 quarterbacks went in the first round. The last of them, Alabama's Mac Jones to the Patriots. You've got a new column out today. It's called Bill Belichick Just Took a Huge Step Away from the Tom Brady Era. Now Mac Jones has to live up to the ghost of the GOAT. What kind of pressure is on this guy, and do you think he can deliver?
Well, he's the first quarterback taken in the first round by Bill Belichick in his entire NFL career, which says a lot. But I think what's really pressurized here that not a lot of people are thinking about is that Nick Saban, potentially the best college football coach in history, and Bill Belichick, the greatest coach in NFL history, now both agree this is the right fit for the Patriots to replace Tom Brady. So, look, if Mac Jones fails here, it means he fails the 2 greatest coaches in the history of American football. That's a lot, and following Tom Brady's a lot. But I will say this about Mac Jones. If you cooked up a player in a laboratory that would have fit this scenario for the Patriots, someone who could take hard coaching, fits so many of the tenets of Tom Brady's game, it would have been Mac Jones. And the Patriots got him by sitting pat. They didn't even have to move for him. They just sat and were patient, and he came to them.
All right, so we've got to talk about Alabama. Jones, one of 6 Crimson Tide players picked in the first round. That ties a record set by the University of Miami. I mean, Alabama just cleaned up last night. Do you love any of these matchups in particular? As a member of Steelers Nation, I'm pretty stoked about Najee Harris.
Yeah, Najee Harris is a perfect fit to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, that's a Mac Jones to the Patriots kind of pick. I mean, we saw that coming a long time. Look, I think Devontae Smith, the Philadelphia Eagles, jumping up ahead of the New York Giants at number 11 and taking the Heisman Trophy winner at a need spot for the Philadelphia Eagles is a great fit. And, what a winning night for Alabama. The last 5 drafts, Alabama has had 21 first-round picks. Now, look, at any given time, there are only 22 players on a football field. So for Alabama to crank out 21 first-round picks in 5 years is absolutely unprecedented. The NFL draft's never seen that happen in the history of football. There's a reason why Nick Saban and Alabama can go and basically pick any prep player in the country they want in any given year, because they can say, hey, guess what?
Yeah.
We are absolutely an NFL factor.
Yeah, I mean, what a program they have there. I have to say, as a split household, we are Steelers and Eagles fans here. We both felt like we got to win last night, so that was pretty great. Let's talk about Trevor Lawrence, but something in particular I want to talk to you about. He's the number 1 pick. He's taken his signing bonus in cryptocurrency. He signed an endorsement deal with crypto investing app Blockfolio. We know tight end Sean Culkin wants to take his entire salary in Bitcoin if he makes the Chiefs. What is going on with crypto and the NFL?
Well, I'll say this about NFL players. They've always liked aggressive investments, and obviously cryptocurrency right now is a very hot and very aggressive investment. No matter where you come out on it, you can't deny that the returns in cryptocurrency have been amazing. You look at the IPO of Coinbase recently, a company that at one point was valued at nearly $100 billion during that IPO, which is just unbelievable. So you can see why Blockfolio would go, hey, you know what? Let's cut a deal with arguably the most famous football player who has dipped his toe into cryptocurrency, Trevor Lawrence. If Trevor Lawrence hits it big, Blockfolio hits it big. And I think that's one of the aspects that NFL players are looking at, not just investing in cryptocurrency now. This was started by Russell Okung, an offensive tackle who a couple of years ago said, hey, I'm putting my salary in cryptocurrency. But the players are going to start to say, what platforms that deal with cryptocurrency can we also invest in? We want to be involved on the ground floor.
All right, Charles, we got to talk about Aaron Rodgers, because who was not talking about him last night? Just hours before the draft, the reports come out that he wants out of Green Bay. The GM says he's not trading him. I say he should just make that guest appearance on Jeopardy a permanent gig or sign with my Steelers. Sorry, Big Ben, but I think it's time to go, my friend. You say the Packers have only themselves to blame for the draft day chaos. How come, and where do you see Rodgers ending up?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of different aspects here. I mean, this is not a new problem with Aaron Rodgers and the general manager there, Brian Gutekunst, the team president, Mark Murphy. This has been brewing for a while, really even going back to January. Aaron Rodgers was making cryptic statements about, hey, I don't know about my future. It's a beautiful mystery. Sure seemed to be leaning into an offseason where he might be making a statement like this. But Allison, I mean, on draft night, this was savage. I mean, for this to happen the first night of the NFL draft, the way that this dropped, I mean, just completely stole the win from. Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. And I'll tell you what, put him on the Steelers. That would be a heck of a match. And I can guarantee you there are a number of NFL teams that if the Green Bay Packers relent, and they're dug in here, but if they relent and say, hey, you know what, all right, we're willing to deal Aaron. Let's see who comes out of the woodwork for this. I think they're, maybe a quarter of the league might actually go, hey, this is our Tom Brady. This is what the Buccaneers did with Tom Brady. We're ready for that all-in push. And, man, I'm not going to lie. I haven't thought about the Steelers, but, ooh, that would be a heck of a match.
Would that be something? Sorry, I brought it up at dinner last night. My husband said, man, the Steelers would be good. Listen, I know it might not happen, and it's a long shot, but a girl can dream, right? Charles, thank you so much for being on. We really love seeing you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Allison.
British soccer teams leading a social media blackout over the next 4 days, boycotting Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to protest online discrimination and bullying. Here's NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley.
Soccer isn't used to silence, but after more than a year of quiet stadiums, global soccer will fall silent once again this weekend, this time with a 4-day boycott of social media, demanding an end to racist abuse online.
What we're saying is we're going to take action. We're not going to stand for it, and we want others to stand with us.
Sanjay Bhandari's Kick It Out organized this digital demonstration, meant to raise voices by lowering them. He wants social media companies to silence racist abusers the same way they control political misinformation. And the sport's loudest voices are almost all saying, "I'm in," to kick racism out of soccer.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in.
We're all in to kick it out.
Soccer's biggest names, the Premier League, the English Football League, and Women's Super League, among others, are confronting the beautiful game's ugly, racist history. Just yesterday, professional cricket and rugby organizations said they would join the boycott too. The plan has made such a splash that now members of Britain's parliament are thinking about putting the issue up for debate, thrusting global sports into a very American conversation about free speech, public decency, and racism.
But there's a difference between free speech and hate speech, and there's a difference between free speech and discrimination. Monkey emojis sent to black players is racist. That's not free speech. That's racism. And free speech does not mean freedom from consequences.
For generations, opposing fans have hurled racist language at players of color, made monkey sounds at black players, thrown bananas at them, even shown swastikas in the stands. Professional soccer spent decades fighting it in the stands, but social media has made it so much worse.
It's that cloak of anonymity where they feel they can say anything. And when they feel they can say anything, they try and find the worst thing possible to say. And they'll go and do it. And then what do I do? Do I ignore it or do I respond?
Nida Manua played pro soccer in Britain and in the US. He's endured racist abuse in real life, like the notorious monkey chant from this under-21 match against Serbia in 2007. Like many pro athletes, he's watched social media companies take on hate speech in politics. Now he wants the same for sports, and he says the moment is ripe for action.
So when I saw the George Floyd tape, I'll be perfectly honest with you, that's the last time I cried, because at that point I was fed up.
Organizers see soccer as more than just a game. It reflects society as well as informing it.
Society is more divided. So guess what? That plays out. But it plays out more acutely in football because the rest of society is becoming like football. Football is always tribal. The rest of society is now tribal. And so it accelerates in football. But the place where it plays out most is online. Online is the real world on steroids. Everything gets exaggerated online.
After the boycott ends on Monday, it'll be up to social media companies to either keep playing or show racism the red card.
At least 45 people killed in a stampede at a religious festival in Israel, another 150 injured. NBC News global correspondent Raf Sanchez shows us what happened.
Allison, grief, shock, and a lot of questions in Israel today. At least 45 people killed in that stampede. That is Israel's worst ever disaster in peacetime. Here's what we know. Tens of thousands of people gathered last night on a mountain in northern Israel to mark the Jewish festival of Lag BaOmer. Coming down the mountain, they went through a narrow metal walkway that at one point went around a sharp corner and down a flight of stairs, and it is looking like it was at that corner that there was confusion, overcrowding, and then people trampled underfoot. I spoke a little earlier to an official from Magan David, that's the Israeli National Ambulance Service. He told me there are children as young as 15 among the dead. More than 150 people injured, being treated at hospitals across northern Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declaring this a terrible disaster and saying Sunday will be a day of national mourning in Israel. But I will say there is a lot of anger in Israel that authorities didn't have a tighter grasp on this situation. This was the largest public gathering in that country since the start of the COVID pandemic. And the Israeli Health Ministry actually warned earlier in the week this event should not go ahead as planned because of the risk of COVID spreading among the crowds. Now, this turned into a different kind of disaster, but the warnings were there about how large these crowds were going to be. Now, the U.S. Embassy in Israel says it is looking into reports that there were Americans among the dead. We do know U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken reached out to his Israeli counterpart to express condolences. He said in a tweet, "We are deeply saddened to hear of the tragedy. We mourn the lives lost, extend our deepest condolences to the families, and pray for the injured to recover quickly." Now, Secretary Blinken was one of a number of global figures to express condolences. The Queen of England also wrote to the Israeli president. The King of Jordan spoke to the Israeli president, and the Palestinian president reached out to his Israeli counterpart to express condolences. Just going to show that even in that difficult neighborhood, human tragedies like this can bring people together.
Carbon monoxide alarms save lives, and in most states, they're required in all homes, but not in Texas. In collaboration with ProPublica and the Texas Tribune, NBC's Antonia Hilton investigates how the state enabled the worst carbon monoxide poisoning catastrophe in recent U.S. history.
Hi, Allison. Texas is one of only 6 states that leave carbon monoxide regulations up to local governments, often resulting in uneven protections and little enforcement. So when the Texas storm hit in February, residents who are low income, vulnerable, or immigrants often paid the price and in some cases made fatal mistakes. Take a look at our investigation with ProPublica and the Texas Tribune. Like millions of Texans, Shalamu Bekele and his wife woke on February 15th, freezing in their Houston home as the power grid failed. They're Ethiopian immigrants, and their 7- and 8-year-olds had never seen snow before.
I was just thinking the power will come back now.
But it didn't. So as temperatures dropped, his wife turned on the car in their garage to get warm. Unaware, the home had no carbon monoxide alarm. What was happening?
By the time I went there, I found her. She passed out.
Then the kids in Shalamu collapsed too. All had been poisoned by carbon monoxide. He woke up almost a day later in the hospital to heartbreak. His wife and daughter had died. His son was in intensive care.
I screamed, and I don't even remember what I was saying.
In our investigation with ProPublica and the Texas Tribune, we found at least 11 Texans died from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Their kids are down in my house not feeling good.
More than 1,400 were also taken to emergency rooms, like the one at Memorial Hermann.
We might see 50 patients a year who were poisoned with carbon monoxide, and we surpassed that on our first night.
According to data obtained by NBC News, almost 80% of the people poisoned by carbon monoxide and treated at Memorial Hermann during the height of the storm were Black or Latino. Texas is one of only 6 states that leave carbon monoxide alarm regulations up to local government. Shalamu said if an alarm had been required in his home, his wife and daughter would still be here. Is there someone you want to see held accountable for this?
I would. I hold accountable the government, the electricity company, and police altogether. They could have saved a lot of lives.
Shalamu is suing the utility. Meantime, he's moved his son out of the home he bought to give his family security and opportunity in America. Experts tell NBC News that this was the largest carbon monoxide poisoning event in recent U.S. history. Right after the storm, lawmakers rushed to address the failing power grid and reform it. But so far, nobody has introduced legislation to address carbon monoxide risks.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.